On Daniel's first morning of retirement, he dressed for work anyway. He buttoned the pale blue shirt Ruth had ironed the night before. He fastened the same silver watch he had worn for 23 years. Then he stood in front of the hallway mirror, reached for his coat, and suddenly remembered. There was nowhere he was expected to be. For 41 years, the clock had told Daniel who he was. At 5:45, he woke. At 6:20, he left the house. At 7, he walked into the railway operations office, where phones rang, schedules changed, and people called his name from across the room. "Daniel, we need you." He had heard those words so often that he never realized how deeply they had entered him. Now the house was silent. Ruth found him standing by the front door, with one hand on his coat. "You forgot?" she asked gently. Daniel forced a laugh. Habit. He returned the coat to its hook, but he kept the shirt on all day. At first, retirement looked like freedom. His coworkers had given him a watch, a cake, and a card filled with promises. "Don't be a stranger. Come back and see us. Now you can finally relax." For the first week, Daniel cleaned the garage. During the second, he organized every tool in the shed. By the third, he had repaired a cabinet that was not broken and sharpened garden shears Ruth had never used. Then, there was nothing left to fix. He began waking later, but he did not feel rested. He sat at the kitchen table reading the newspaper from beginning to end, including articles he did not care about. Sometimes, he looked at the clock and imagined what was happening at the office. At 8:15, the morning freight would be leaving the Eastern Yard. At 10:30, the scheduling meeting would begin. At 2, someone would discover the mistake Daniel used to catch before anyone else noticed. For several weeks, his old colleagues called. Then the calls became shorter. Eventually, they stopped. Daniel told himself they were busy. He understood. Work moved quickly. New people learned old responsibilities. That was the way of the world. But understanding something did not prevent it from hurting. One Tuesday, Daniel drove to the station with a box of pastries. He had rehearsed the visit in his mind. They would see him, smile, and ask for advice. Perhaps someone would say the place had not been the same without him. Instead, the receptionist was new. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. "Sir. Not Daniel. Not Mr. Harris. Just sir." He explained that he had worked there for 41 years. She smiled politely and called upstairs. A young supervisor came down. Daniel remembered training him long ago, but the man seemed distracted. "Good to see you," he said, glancing at his phone. "Things are crazy today." Daniel held out the pastries. "I thought I'd stop by." "That's kind of you. I'll put these in the break room." The visit lasted 7 minutes. As Daniel walked back to his car, he heard a train moving beyond the fence. The sound had once made him feel connected to something large and necessary. That morning, it sounded as if the whole world were leaving without him. At home, Ruth asked how the visit had gone. "Fine," he said. Then he went to the bedroom, removed his silver watch, and placed it inside a drawer. After that, Daniel changed. He stopped shaving every morning. He declined invitations from neighbors. When Ruth suggested a weekend trip, he said the traffic would be bad. When she asked whether he wanted to join a walking group, he replied that walking in circles with strangers was pointless. But the truth was not that Daniel disliked those things. The truth was that he did not know who he would be while doing them. At work, he had been the man with answers. Outside of work, he felt like a man no one had asked a question. One afternoon, Ruth found him sitting in the darkened living room. "Daniel," she said, "I miss you." He looked up. "I'm right here. Your body is." The words stung because they were true. Ruth sat beside him. "For years you said you worked so hard because you wanted us to have a life. Now we finally have the time, and you're acting as if your life ended when the job did." Daniel stared at his hands. "People needed me there." Ruth's expression softened. "I know. They called my name. They trusted me. If something went wrong, I knew what to do. And now? Daniel swallowed. Now, I don't know what I'm for. Ruth did not rush to comfort him. She did not tell him that everything was fine. She simply placed her hand over his and said, "Maybe that is not a question retirement answers for you. Maybe it is a question you finally get to answer for yourself." The next morning, Ruth asked Daniel to walk with her to the neighborhood market. Halfway there, they passed a small community center. Near the entrance stood an old wooden bench with one broken slat. A handwritten sign warned people not to sit on it. Daniel stopped. He examined the split wood, the rusted bolts, and the sagging frame. "That bench has been broken for months," Ruth said. Daniel ran his thumb over the damaged slat. "It shouldn't take more than an hour. Then why don't you tell them?" Inside, the center's director was arranging donated food. She listened as Daniel explained what the bench needed. "We don't have money to replace it," she said. "You don't need to replace it." The following morning, Daniel returned with his toolbox. The repair took 3 hours, not 1. The bolts were more corroded than he expected. The replacement wood had to be measured twice. Yet for the first time in months, Daniel forgot to look at the clock. A boy named Noah watched from the steps. "How do you know where to drill?" he asked. Daniel showed him how to mark the center of the wood. "And how do you make it straight?" "You don't guess," Daniel said. "You measure." Noah stayed until the bench was finished. When Daniel tightened the final bolt, an elderly woman lowered herself carefully onto the seat. She pressed both hands against the wood, smiled, and said, "I've missed sitting here in the sun." It was a small sentence. No one applauded. No manager shook his hand. No report carried his name. Still, something inside Daniel stirred. Before he left, the director pointed toward a storage room. Its door would not close. 2 tables wobbled. A shelf leaned dangerously to one side. "Would you mind looking at those someday?" she asked. Someday. Daniel returned on Thursday, then again on Saturday. Soon, other people began bringing small things they could not afford to replace. A lamp with a loose wire, a chair with a cracked leg, a radio that had gone silent. Daniel could not repair everything, but he listened to every story. Often, the object mattered less than the memory attached to it. One woman brought a wooden music box that had belonged to her husband. A young father carried in a bicycle his daughter had outgrown, but his younger son was waiting to ride. Noah returned with 2 friends and asked if Daniel would teach them to use the tools. Every Wednesday, Daniel opened the storage room and placed a handwritten sign on the door. "Repair morning, bring what you have." Months later, the railway office called him. A former colleague was organizing a reunion and wanted to know if Daniel would attend. He said yes. When he entered the old building, some faces lit up. Others did not recognize him. The young supervisor apologized for being rushed during Daniel's last visit. "We were lost without you for a while," he admitted. "But we figured it out. We ass. We ass. We. Daniel expected those words to hurt. They did not. He smiled. "You were supposed to." That was the part he had never understood. Being replaced did not erase what he had given. The trains continued because he had helped build systems others could carry forward. Their ability to go on without him was not proof that he had been useless. It was proof that his work had been completed. When Daniel returned home, he opened the drawer and found the silver watch. He fastened it around his wrist, not because the clock controlled him again, but because the watch no longer belonged only to the man he had been. The following Wednesday, Noah was waiting outside the community center. "We need you," the boy said, holding up a broken birdhouse. Daniel smiled, then gently corrected him. "You don't need me. But I'd be glad to help." After 60, many people quietly suffer when the roles that once defined them begin to disappear. A career ends. Children build lives of their own. The phone rings less often. The world stops asking for the things we once knew how to give. And it is easy to confuse being needed with being valuable. But your value was never created by a job title, a schedule, or the number of people waiting for your answer. Those things only gave your value a place to be expressed. When one place closes, you do not disappear. You are still carrying everything life taught you: patience, judgment, humor, tenderness, skill, and the ability to notice what others overlook. Perhaps the question is no longer, who still needs me? Perhaps the better question is, what can I give now that I finally get to choose? Retirement did not take Daniel's purpose away. It removed the uniform his purpose had been wearing. And when he stopped trying to become the man he used to be, he finally met the man he still had time to become.